Welcome to the Ultimate General Spring event. Take on challenges in the Battle of Gettysburg scenario to earn limited time cosmetic items for your units. Collect Southern Lilies by completing Confederate challenges to get the Doomed Division skin for Pickett's Division. Complete Union challenges to acquire the Grand American skin for the 20th Maine. Experience accelerators are available for paperbacks. Our premium currency available at the Quartermaster, where you can find the Marvel tie-in Iron Brigade skins. Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and that little write-up was done by Wesley, someone on one of the Discord channels that I'm in, about some news that I'm going to be talking about today. Wesley does run a couple of podcasts, the History of the Great War podcast, as well as the History of the Second World War, so definitely check those out. And the news that I'm going to be talking to you about today is something that, as you can tell maybe from this intro, I'm a little bit concerned about. The news is that Gamelabs, the developers of Ultimate General, Ultimate Admiral, This Land Is My Land, and Naval Action, has been sold to Stillfront Group, which is actually a pretty large company that I had never heard of before. First, some thank you to Tortuga Power. He runs another YouTube channel. He's my co-host on the Single Malt Strategy podcast. And he actually brought this news to me because I haven't seen it reported anywhere. Wargamer.com doesn't seem to really report wargaming news, as far as I can tell. They have very little in any event. And none of the other publications that I kind of loosely follow have really jumped into this. So I figured, like, hey, if nobody's talking about this, this is kind of a big deal. So I figured I'd make a video on it. You can find a link to Tortuga's channel in the description if you're interested. He does some really great stuff. And thank you to him for making me aware of this. But this is kind of a big deal, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of telling you like every single game that Gamelabs has made and why I love several of them a lot. You know, I can tell you at one point in 2018, I had 600 videos total on my channel at the time over the 6 years I'd been doing YouTube, and a quarter of them to a third were all Ultimate General and Ultimate General games. You know, Gettysburg and Civil War, and so you can tell that they're games that I play a lot of, and they mean a lot to me. And I think they're important in the wargaming and strategy space because especially the Ultimate General and Ultimate Admiral games, they're games that look good. They're games that have well thought out and well designed UIs. And they're games that I think could appeal to folks who are not existing, you know, entrenched in the war game and strategy gaming spaces. And I think you definitely saw that with some of the success that came up around Ultimate General, Gettysburg, and then Civil War. So these are games that have the ability to expand, in theory anyway, expand the visibility of the hobby that we love and that I love on this channel. And so it's important to me. Gamelabs has made its own mistakes, its own missteps. They've had some troubled development on some of their games. We're not going to talk about that here so much as we're going to say this is a studio that has done some good, and it's a studio that I've enjoyed some of their games, and they're being bought out by a company called Stillfront Games. So what does that matter? What does that mean? Well, if you go to Stillfront's website, they're pretty frank about what it is they do. Like what is Stillfront Games? Well, if you go to stillfront.com, which is the website for the developer, they've got a banner about their acquisition of Gamelabs, but right below that, it says, Stillfront is a leading free-to-play powerhouse of gaming studios. Our diverse and exciting game portfolio has two common themes, loyal users and long life cycle games. Well, right up there in the title, free-to-play powerhouse. So that's a little bit odd, right? Like, nothing Gamelabs has ever done is free-to-play. They don't do mobile games. Well, I guess Gettysburg did have a mobile app, but they really don't focus on mobile games, and they don't focus on free-to-play. They don't even do it. So, okay, so what does Stillfront see in these guys? Well, if you dig into the actual press release where Stillfront is sort of talking to their shareholders about this acquisition, they say, as part of the Stillfront Group, the studio will continue expanding and improving its portfolio of premium games. But, so that part's good, but then it also says, but also expand into GaaS, games as a service, and free-to-play with clear focus on historical strategy and battle themes. The acquisition of Gamelabs further strengthens Stillfront's existing portfolio of mid-hardcore games in the strategy and action genre, addressing primarily the attractive 30-plus male audience. Well, first off, there's a lot to unpack here in this statement. a lot that's concerning from a PC strategy gamer. Like I don't try to gatekeep. I don't really do that on this channel. I love a lot of different type of games. Different folks like different types of games. And who am I to say what is or what isn't a strategy game? What I will say is that Stillfront is saying they're going to allow Gamelabs to continue premium games. That part is great. I hope that's true. The entire rest of the focus of the statement seems to be on games as service, which is, I'm assuming, like subscription-based games where you're talking like MMOs or stuff like that, and free-to-play games. If you look at Stillfront, the developers they own develop games like Call to War or War and Peace, American Civil War. Almost all of their games sort of fall into that genre. Those are free-to-play games that you can find advertised up the hilt on Facebook. They focus on mobile games. Stillfront itself, I don't know that they really develop a whole lot of games themselves. That's kind of the interesting piece here, because if you take a look at Stillfront, like the company, and you take a look at their history, they were founded in 2010. And then starting in 2012, they basically just started acquiring a whole bunch of companies, but all those companies really seem to be focused on mobile or browser-based games. So in 2012, they acquired Power Challenge, which is apparently a mobile and browser-based company that really focuses on like sports games. It looks like Power Soccer is one of their games. Manager Zone is another one of their games. In 2013, they acquired part of Bytro Labs, 51%, and then they bought out the remainder of the company in 2016. Those are the guys who are behind a browser-based game I see advertised a lot on Facebook called Supremacy 1914. I'm not going to go through every company they've acquired because they're actually a pretty large company. Again, I hadn't really heard of them before this acquisition, but I did a little bit of digging. They've got a market cap that I think translates out to about 3.3 billion US dollars, which would make them about 30% larger than Paradox Interactive when you take a look at Paradox's own market cap, also in Swedish krona, because they're both based out of Sweden. I'm definitely not going to make this into a business analysis video. The point I'm trying to make is they're a large company. They have a lot of employees. They have a lot of studios. They've acquired a lot of studios. And I think the question is really what does this entail for Gamelabs? And if we dig into the shareholder information that they did provide for this transaction, I think we do get some hints as far as what the future entails. First off, I think one interesting thing, apparently this is a pretty big transaction. Gamelabs was sold for $32 million, $22 million in cash and $10 million in stock. Additionally, the owners and managers of Gamelabs can acquire a further $30 million in 2021, 2022, and 2023, an aggregate total of an additional $30 million, depending on if they hit certain performance quotas that are laid out in stone, presumably privately, by Stillfront to Gamelabs. So there's a vested interest in the Gamelabs folks to perform and to do well. And actually, that does give us a little bit of a hint about what is in store for these guys. I think the folks are going to stay working with Gamelabs under the Stillfront umbrella, which is a good thing. First off, we know that, at least for a period of time, that's true, because the press release says the founders and other key employees will remain with Gamelabs and be part of the management of Gamelabs post-closing of the transaction. So that tells us that the key employees and also the founders of the company will be remaining in place. Additionally, these payouts are contingent upon Gamelabs performing. So presumably, the folks who have been given stock aren't going to jump ship in the next 3 years if there's an opportunity for them to earn another $30 million if their games do well. So I think that's telling us pretty clearly that the Gamelabs key leadership, presumably I think there's two co-owners, and then Nick Tomatis, who's a senior designer and is the designer behind the Gamelabs like Ultimate General games, and then I think Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. He'll probably, I would hope, stay in place to complete some of their work and hopefully have some success. Where I get a little bit less optimistic is when you take a look at some of what they're talking about is going to come down the pipe for these guys. And that's the quote I already shared around their focus on premium games, but also games as a service. So, we'll see what that means. I don't really know what to make of that. I hope it's not something that, completely shifts what Gamelabs is intending to do. I think it's kind of interesting when you read through, and again, all of this, by the way, guys, I know I haven't like put little quotes or little tags on all of these images, but all of this is coming from the Stillfront press release to their shareholders. You can find it on stillfrontgroup.com. It's kind of on the home banner right now. There's a link in the description as well to the sources. But one of the other interesting things, I think, is from the Gamelabs CEO, where he says, joining Stillfront opens up a new chapter for Gamelabs, allowing us to bring even more excitement and emotions for our beloved players by improving current games and by introducing new worlds for players to escape to. Stillfront's expertise in mobile and cross-platform, paired with its wider knowledge of the market, creates new opportunities that we would have never even imagined possible. That's CEO Maxim Zazov of Gamelabs. I don't know what to make of that. There's some stuff in there where it's kind of like, maybe the thought process between joining Stillfront is that, hey, listen, we get access to all this additional capital. We get access to marketing and other resources that'll allow us to get our games out there. And we will have the necessary resources, developers, what have you, to go out and complete games like Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, which seems to have really suffered from a lack of a larger team, given some of the delays the game has had. Or you could say something similar about naval action, or maybe consultants or other things like that will allow them to better position some of their games. I hope it's not, hey, they're going to help us turn these games into free-to-play platforms, because that's not what I'm looking for personally from these games. But we have no real way to know until we see what happens with them. So, I don't want to go too long into like hypotheticals, doom and gloom. Like, we don't know what we don't know. We just know that this one press release is all we've found out. The developers on the Gamelab forums, I checked as of Sunday, have said nothing. Actually Monday, they had said nothing about this, despite it being out there for a few days. They've gone radio silent, which kind of makes sense. Like, if they're going through an acquisition, that they're probably not allowed to say certain things. They probably need to figure out how they're going to handle, certain things on their forums. But that'll be interesting. There are a couple of other interesting, just sort of business tidbits. I thought one thing that was interesting was that they kind of shared what their revenue forecast was for Gamelabs for this year, which is a little bit of behind the scenes that we don't usually see for strategy games, because so few strategy games are publicly held companies. And Gamelabs now is part of a publicly held company. So they said that the unaudited forecast figures for Gamelabs for full year 2021, Gamelabs is expected to generate pro forma IFRS net revenue of approximately 70 to 80 million SEK. That translates roughly out to, I think, between like $7.5 to $8 million. And adjusted pro forma IFRS EBITDA margin of approximately 50 to 55% for full year 2021. The financial assumption in 2021 is based on the forecast for the acquisition, and the expected growth is fueled by a planned early access release in the last quarter of 2021. So in this press release, it was pretty clear at the time Ultimate Admiral Age of Sail had not released yet. There's some other terminology in here that indicates that it's still in early access. There's also some indication in here that the approval they got from their shareholders to make the transaction to issue the additional shares occurred in the winter of 2020. So some of this, I think, might be dated information. So I don't think the game they're talking about is Ultimate Admiral Age of Sail. I'm assuming what they're talking about this revenue is Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts going on sale on Steam, I would guess, if that's what they're talking about, the late Q4 of 2021 game. That seems to be the game that they're the closest toward releasing, but isn't available for sale yet. Like, This Land Is My Land is already for sale. Ultimate Admiral Age of Sail is already for sale. So if they're talking about a new game entering early access in Q4, that would really sort of mesh up with it being Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, which you can purchase, but you can't purchase through Steam yet. So that's my assumption there. But that kind of telling us they're making like $7.5 to $9 million a year. Like, that's their forecast for the year, which seems like a lot for a strategy company. I mean, being purchased for 30 million it seems like a lot for anything that I'm used to seeing for a strategy gaming company. I mean, obviously Paradox kind of overshoots the mold there, but they're a little bit of a unique situation. I don't think Paradox is a good example or a good comparison for most strategy games. So, or companies. All right, so I will leave you guys with one last thing that kind of doesn't give us a ton of answers, but there's two more pieces of information that I found if you go to Stillfront's business model section of their website, which may or may not matter for this. But essentially, I'm a little bit uncertain how's Gamelabs going to work with these guys. Some of the press release information is a little bit both ways. What does it mean for free to play versus, premium games? If you go to their website and you go to their business model section, you can see it says that Stillfront acquires. Their strategy is that they acquire and develop game studios and let them operate freely in a decentralized structure for the purpose of creating a diversified portfolio of games. So that to me is good. That's encouraging. That maybe that says, hey, Gamelabs, you guys needed a little bit of help getting some games out. You've had some turnover and issues with developers. We can provide you the resources for whether they be developers, marketing resource, market analysis, taking a look at what's out there and what'll work and what won't. Like a big company like this could really be helpful to a small studio to be able to make sure that they don't have issues with developer turnover, that they have access to capital to make the investments they need to make, and that they know what they need to know to really approach a game with a clear design focus. That could be a really good thing that a company like Stillfront can provide Gamelabs that'll make their games even better and allow them to continue developing the kind of games that we like to play. What makes me a little bit less certain is if you go to their little graphic down here, which seems to be like, I don't know, some sort of business triangle. It says they sort of have three key pieces to their pyramid of success here. Games as a hobby, whatever that means. Games as a service, which usually has a not so great moniker, and free to play. That's the part that really worries me. If they're saying free to play is the absolute base of their pyramid, they focus on monetization, retention, and conversion. So free to play is the foundation to their gaming pyramid. Data-driven with high conversion rate. Focus on gaming experience and user acquisition to support later conversion into paying customers. That's a red flag for me. I really hope that this is just some sort of outdated graphic with some of the strategies they've gone in the past, that they're not going to lean on Gamelabs to become a free-to-play company. But we'll see. That's the piece that gives me the most pause. So, I guess we don't really know what we don't know. We'll have to see. They've apparently acquired 20 studios across the globe. They focus on long lifetime games, so games that people continue to play over time, which I think is true of the Ultimate General games, but they don't make more money off it once you buy it once. So again, that kind of seems to focus on their free-to-play approach. And even down here in their position to grow, our strong brand and marketing skills and free-to-play model paired with strong track record of value-creating acquisitions provides a good platform for continued strong growth well above the market for many years to come. Free-to-play is in like everything that they talk about, all over their website, all over their strategy, all over their focus. Maybe Gamelabs is a way for them to diversify a little bit and to be less dependent on free-to-play. I really hope that's the approach they're going for. But with all that being said, we really don't know what the future has in store for us, so I guess we're going to have to wait to find out. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I don't do a ton of news or reporting. I don't claim to be someone who's great at connecting all the dots and forecasting the future. All I know is that the company that's made two of the most well-received mainstreamy Civil War games in the last, I don't know, probably the last 15, 20 years. It's these guys, and I feel like the Take Command and Scourge of War games, and there's other Civil War games out there, but in terms of like more broad appeal, these kind of seem to take the cake. So it's a big deal to me, and the dollars are big dollars. So what do you guys think? Check out the documents in the description. Go ahead and let me know, how you read all of this. What do you think the future has in store for us? I think it'd be a great discussion point. It'll be really interesting to watch as things unfold and what they look like. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts below. And until next time, as always, this is the Historical Gamer saying once again, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, I'm out.